Do women actually prefer betas? Right? Someone sent me a link to a video that is called "Why Women Prefer Betas," and I wanted to go over this real quick. I haven't made some videos in a while. I've been busy with some other things. I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. But I wanted to talk about this because I watched through this and I said, okay, there's a misconception here. This started with this poll on Twitter. If you're not familiar with this poll on Twitter, let me see if I can kind of find in the video where you can see what we're talking about here. But basically there was this guy, okay, yeah, and they had two pictures of him, right? Him before the transformation and afterwards, and they asked men and women, they did a poll, if he looked better before or looked better after, if he was more attractive before or after. And the men majority said after, the women majority said before. In fact, only like 7% of women said that he looked better after. Okay, and guys, of course, were like, "Oh, they're lying. It's crazy. There's no way this is true." And I'm with you guys on that one. Yeah, there's no way this is true. Women are lying about this. Absolutely, 100%. I agree. Okay, they don't know they're lying though, and here's why. And this is what I want to break down in this. Right, so. Healthy gamer GG. He has a lot of great content. I love his content. Really, really good stuff. He started talking about this, and he was sort of explaining away the science behind this. But I want to point to one point in this video, because we're not going to have time to go through this whole video, but about this experiment. So let me just go ahead and play this for you.
So if we're sort of like thinking about this, right? So there's some evidence, kind of whatever, right? These are cross-sectional studies, whatever, that suggests that drive for muscularity or being super in shape may be negatively associated with relationships. Now, here's the study that I think is really fascinating, okay? So this study is absolutely wild. The influence of body composition effects on male facial masculinity and attractiveness. So this study is really precise. So here's what they did. They took a group of real faces, and they showed them to women with a lower amount of fat, a regular amount of fat, or a higher amount of fat. And then what they did is take the same faces, lowered the amount of muscle, kept a regular amount of muscle, or increased the amount of muscle. So this study is very different from the other two, because this study is the most experimental, where they literally show women a person's face, and then they lower the fat or increase the fat, or they lower the muscularity and they increase the muscularity. So this is the study that the most precisely tests. If you're a man and you become more muscular, how will it change a woman's perception of your attractiveness? If you're a man and you become more fat, how will it change a woman's perception of your attractiveness, right? So if we go back to some of these Twitter threads about women will choose an in-shape guy all day, every day, now we have some really interesting, a really interesting experiment. Now we have an experiment that shows...
Okay, so just to kind of break this down, right? So obviously, they've got this experiment where they have a male face, the same face, and they're either going to increase the fat on the face or lower it, and then another test of increasing the muscle or lower it, right? So that will tell you, at least aesthetically from the face, what do women prefer, honestly, right? This is a very, I mean, again, it's not going to be 100% honest because women are still picking this. They're still aware that people are looking at their judgments of this. So, and there's subconscious cues and things like that. But let's just say this is pretty damn accurate. So let's see what the results were.
If I literally take the same dude, same physical face, right? So equally attractive, there's no influence about how much money they make or how kind they are, and I literally adjust the level of muscularity, what difference does that make for women? So this study is really important because when we make statements like this, women will choose the in-shape guy all day, every day. This study is the most precise measure of that, right? So if I literally take this person and I make him more muscular or less muscular, how will women respond? And this is where things get crazy. Women have been found to prefer more masculine-looking men when considering short-term relationships compared with long-term relationships. There's prior studies that show that, okay? So that's the first thing. We digitally transform face shape, simulating the effects of raised and lowered levels of body fat or muscle, controlling for each other, and then age or height, right? So they basically transform the faces. We already talked about that. The face shape correlates of muscle mass profoundly enhanced perceived masculinity, okay? So this is important. So as you become more muscular, there is a perception that you become more masculine. Makes sense, right? One dude is more manly, the ripped dude is more manly than the unripped dude. But masculinity does not necessarily correlate with mate selection. Here's the big discrepancy between men and women. In study 2, we asked two groups of women to optimize male face images. So they asked the women to resemble someone they would prefer, either for a short-term sexual relationship or long-term relationship. So what they basically did is they asked women, you can adjust the face however you want. Make the face more suited for what you prefer in a short-term relationship, and then make the face into what you prefer for a long-term relationship. And what we discover is that women prefer the appearance of male faces associated with a higher muscle mass for short-term compared with long-term relationships. So when you ask a woman, change the face to whatever you prefer for a short-term relationship, they make it more muscular. And when we ask about long-term relationships, they don't make that change. So that may sound kind of confusing, but now women are basically getting to pick, right? What is the level of muscularity that they prefer? So we found that women preferred faces associated with a higher muscle mass for short-term relationships rather than long-term relationships. Now the question is why? Previous studies have revealed that men with high testosterone levels and more fat-free men.
It also says here, but that women do not show different preferences for facial cues to fat mass between short and long-term relationships. Okay.
I.e. greater muscle mass, report having a larger number of sex partners, indicating that these men might devote more effort into mating relative to parenting. I.e. studies suggest that dudes who are super cut and have higher levels of testosterone are more likely to want to mate as opposed to parent. Further, other studies show that men with high testosterone levels are less likely to get married and more likely...
Okay, so blah, blah, blah. What does this mean, right? So essentially, he's misinterpreting the studies. I'll tell you why. Because he doesn't understand female psychology. He doesn't understand one key thing here, right? So what he's saying here and what the study is saying is that women prefer the more muscular guys for short-term relationships, right? And they choose this, okay? So that actually proves exactly what the men in that Twitter thread are saying. That does prove definitively that women prefer the more muscular, more ripped guy. Every day they will choose that guy. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. That's for short-term relationships, not for long-term relationships. Correct. But here's the thing. If a woman chooses you for a short-term relationship, then she would also choose you if she could for a long-term relationship, right? Think about this, right? If a woman would sleep with you, essentially, let's say do a one-night stand, you'd pick her up in a nightclub or a bar, she's also going to be open to a long-term relationship. Now, she might not think that she would have a long-term relationship with you, and that's why women might make that choice, make the distinction in their logical mind between a short-term and long-term relationship and who would be a good match for them, okay? But this isn't based on logic. Women's selection in mate isn't based on logic. It's based on emotion. It's based on feeling, right? And so which man is the woman going to fall harder for, crush harder on? The guy that's more physically attractive that she chooses for the short-term mating strategy, or the long-term mating strategy guy? It's going to be the first one, right? It's just that the first one is less likely to be accessible. And so women logically are picking the choice that seems like a better choice for the long term, even though that's not the choice that they're actually going to pick in real life. Does that make sense? So that's the confusion with this, right? And again, I'm not trying to convince you of some kind of ridiculous black pill thing that is all about looks and you have to be the best looking guy. But what I am saying is that it's ridiculous to think that women would choose the dad bod guy. That's never going to be the case. I'm not saying that women don't ever choose dad bod guys, but what I'm saying is that given the option, right, of having the more ripped, muscular, better looking guy, they're going to pick that guy 100% of the time, pretty much. Okay. They're just not going to be aware that they're making that choice, because even if they say, I'm going to pick this guy for short term, but I don't want him for long term. If you're a guy, that's all you care about. That's all you need. That's all that really matters, right? In fact, if you think about it, what do you care if women want to pick you for long-term relationships? That's not, you know psychologically, right? You know from your own experience as a man that if a woman will pick you for short-term casual sex, that she's going to pick you for long-term. It just makes sense.